Welcome to a new episode of Longevity to Go. I am particularly pleased to welcome someone today who is very dear to my heart, namely my husband, Dr. Robert Bauder. As a dental all-rounder, Robert has spent around 30 years in intensive practice, focusing on prevention, periodontics, implantology, and especially complex aesthetic metal-free full restorations. In addition, he is also a specialist in ceramic implants and holistic biological dentistry, as well as a certified sports dentist. I know that with his decades of background, optimizing overall health and thus longevity is a matter close to Robert's heart. As a passionate amateur athlete and former classical musician, he is also curious about new paths, high-tech and technologies. As an all-rounder and specialist, he strives to bridge the gap between old knowledge and new knowledge and to bring together the best of all worlds for the people he works with. Innovation, high-tech, and artificial intelligence are just as much a part of a modern lifestyle for him as proven routines, ancient knowledge, practical experience, and scientific curiosity. I am particularly pleased to be here today to present our book, Silent Root Cause, which we have published together and which he has written to all of you. It is a special concern of ours because this book is about the so-called silent root cause, and we will be discussing exactly what that is today. And this topic should definitely not only move every single person, but should also provide them with opportunities to optimize their daily lives, manage better, and place the theme of longevity at the very forefront. Welcome, Robert. Thank you for taking the time today to start the first episode with me.
Thanks for the invite. I didn't have far to go.
Before we get started, I'd say we toast with our matcha tea to a long life.
Definitely.
To love and health.
What kind is this? Is it the ceremonial?
It's the ceremonial grade, exactly.
Thanks. I love matcha and green tea and water. So tell me, get to your questions so we don't keep people waiting too long with... Although it really tastes very good, I must say. I have to have another sip. Super delicious and healthy. Antioxidants without end.
Let us know, how did you even come up with the idea to write such a thick tome? What moved you? Why is it even important to you to write about it?
The main reason why I wrote this book or even had the idea for it in the first place is that in about 30 years of practice with tens of thousands of patients I've treated myself, you actually notice, especially when you have a holistic view of dental health and overall health, that again and again similar mechanisms lead on the one hand to dental diseases and as a result to systemic diseases, and that on the other hand certain lifestyle systemic diseases directly and indirectly bring about dental diseases with often far-reaching adverse health consequences, that there's a huge knowledge gap there, but also a huge opportunity hidden at the same time to use the right knowledge and know-how to independently and significantly improve your overall health. And indirectly, of course, longevity, or rather healthy longevity. And instead of repeating the same 17 points in every single consultation, we could simplify things and make this broad knowledge, which affects so many people, accessible to a much wider audience. And it's also a fact that you notice that even very obvious and important mechanisms are often simply not known or not in people's awareness. And it's a real shame because as a result, a lot of potential health is, let's say, prevented, or a lot of diseases allowed to develop. And this should simply be an important contribution to better health. Naturally, I come from dentistry, so more dental health, more overall health, more performance, more healthy longevity, hence longevity. And indirectly, of course, or quite significantly, more happiness, a better quality of life, and all those things. And you can see from the success of the treatments we've seen over the decades what kind of lasting health improvements we can achieve. It's truly fantastic, and it's just a pity that so few people, or only very well-informed people, often know about these overall connections. And it's simply about making this knowledge widely available. That's also the purpose of this podcast.
You mentioned an important keyword earlier, the topic of longevity. What does true longevity actually mean to you?
Well, basically, as the name suggests, living long, but also longevity in the sense of healthy longevity. I mean, I think it's like this. Everyone wants to grow old, but nobody wants to be old. What does the latter mean? That no one wants that state of frailty, lack of autonomy, the, let's say, loss of independence, self-reliance, vitality, neurodegenerative decline. Everyone actually wants to lead a healthy, fit, and very, very long life. That's a very understandable and relatable desire. I have that same wish myself, for example. And so it's simply about how one can achieve that efficiently. It involves a lot of know-how, lifestyle, and awareness. Because it's about everyone being the architect of their own fortune, or in this case, the architect of their own health, so to speak. And we can contribute a great deal to that, especially in the field of holistic dentistry. And the question was, what does it mean? So healthy, long, fit, vital, and maximum joy of life. Everyone should be able to shape that for themselves however they want. And we can really, if we start early enough, contribute enormously to that. And that's what it's about.
I've noticed that, for example, in working with people in psychotherapy or in discussions with companies or even in practice, the goal of a long life, of longevity, is often way too far off. Because usually people have a problem, they come in for it, they want it fixed, so to speak, and then they leave again. Why do you think that you can already, in your field of biological dentistry, for instance, lay a major foundation here to help people ultimately not just to raise awareness, but to provide the best possible foundation for them to have a long and good life? Why should a connection be established there?
Basically, the whole topic of long life, or as it's called in modern terms, longevity, actually always requires thinking in decades. That means it's always about long-term effects, or very often about the long-term consequences of some imbalances, or in a bad way, unhealthy developments in the truest sense of the word. The fact is that dental health, especially from a holistic perspective, whether unintentionally or just as a matter of fact, has an enormously significant impact on overall health, and overall health or metabolic states also naturally have a very large influence on dental health. But let's stick with the cause, which is dental health. So healthy teeth aren't just important for biting and smiling. They're a basic prerequisite for maintaining optimal systemic health, or conversely, typical dental diseases like cavities, periodontitis, silent inflammation, and so on, infections of the gums, jawbone, dental nerves, etc., are a huge disease factor for systemic illnesses of all kinds, and thus directly and indirectly a massive aging factor. In other words, you don't just get sicker, you also naturally age faster, become less vital, and decline to some extent. And the question that was asked was why I think we should really focus on that. Because if you shift the focus toward prevention and overall health or disease avoidance early enough in the process, it can truly make a difference. In this case, avoiding dental disease and thus avoiding disease in a general sense, and you do it effectively and successfully in good time, you have one of the most effective levers for establishing overall health decades later right in your hands. And the key points are lifestyle dependent, meaning that's where your own awareness and your own lifestyle are absolutely decisive. And that's also what the book is about, knowing what you can do yourself. It's really about preventing the need for treatment from the ground up. And if treatment is necessary, to design it according to the findings of modern holistic biological dentistry, using high-tech methods, to design it systemically, holistically, immunologically, and toxicologically so that the, let's say, best results in terms of optimal longevity, aesthetics, and overall biology are achievable. And a lot has happened in recent decades, both in terms of therapeutic options and also the insights gained. And that's primarily what this book is about. So it's about prevention and it's about remediation. Both are silent root cause topics. And it's about raising awareness and transferring knowledge. And of course, it's about a horizon spanning decades. On the one hand, the foundation for health is laid early on. The oral cavity is of crucial importance, a contributing factor, not exclusively, but it's very significant due to its intensive interconnection with all systems in the entire organism. And it's about long-term effects on the whole life because it essentially compounds. It's like a health dividend. Maybe we can talk about that separately later. But the positive thing is that even if a lot has gone wrong, let's say in earlier years and decades of life, it's never too late to turn things around quite significantly, effectively, and positively. So even in the age group of 50, 60, 70, even 80 plus, you can still do a lot for better dental health and better systemic health. Of course, the earlier and more decisively you turn things around, the more effective and successful it is overall. But even when you reach an older age, you can still take a wide variety of health-promoting measures, make significant changes to your lifestyle, undergo various forms of remediation, and so on. By doing these things, you can ensure that you still have much better prospects for your future health and well-being than if you simply continue heading in the wrong direction without making any positive changes.
That means that basically a mindset shift is needed, not just for the patient, but in principle also for the dentists. This means moving much more away from simply repairing any cavities or whatever towards a longevity approach, becoming a kind of longevity mentor or longevity coach.
Absolutely.
You also write about biolongevity dentistry in your book. What exactly does that mean?
Absolutely right. Well, strictly speaking, it's always been the case that doctors should actually be health coaches. There's the legend of ancient China where doctors were always paid when the patient was healthy. So actually, especially we in dentistry, and this is also true in conventional dentistry, have an enormous, let's say, positive impact on preventive medicine. And we can actually avoid dental diseases quite effectively for the most part. This requires a certain level of awareness, know-how, discipline, and appropriate measures, both on the part of the practitioner and the patient. This has been known for a long time. It's more or less successful, and we could be much, much more successful. So especially in dentistry, prevention is the key to long-term success in dental health. That is a very, very, very important thing. From a holistic perspective, we naturally have much more powerful tools at our disposal than what the pure, let's say, rather one-sided, symptom-oriented conventional medical industry suggests, which is to say just brushing. That's all important and good, but it's actually mostly about proper nutrition and a healthy lifestyle. And that's often severely lacking in the typical lifestyle common in our Western societies. But yes, to get back to your point, we are actually health coaches and should focus less on repairs. Of course, we also have to do restorative dentistry because things do break, and then it's a matter of how you do it, under what premises and with what materials and methods you carry out these repairs. The goal is actually to avoid the need for repairs and to prevent silent root causes from the ground up. And if it is necessary, to perform them optimally from an immunological, holistic, technical, and longevity standpoint. Again, silent root cause because incorrectly performed or let's say low quality short-term oriented repair mechanisms harbor the next silent root cause issue as hidden cavities continue to grow and poor filling margins lead to further consequential damage. So we must ensure that we prevent further medical consequential damage through our actions as much as possible. Nothing is perfect, especially not in medicine, except for perfect prevention, which would be almost perfect. But since it usually doesn't work out perfectly in reality, we also have to establish excellent methods for repair and restoration concepts because from an evolutionary perspective, back in the Paleolithic era, the typical life expectancy due to environmental conditions and life hazards was perhaps 30 years at most. Probably not primarily due to poor nutrition, but rather because of other life-threatening dangers, like saber-toothed tigers or something. And today, especially in modern longevity medicine, we're talking about hoped for or realistically expected time horizons of a lifespan of 90 plus, ideally maybe even 100 plus, and that with a good quality of life. So we have to ensure that even in old age, we not only have healthy teeth for biting, eating, and laughing healthily, but that we also keep this entire dental system as healthy, infection-free, and inflammation-free as possible, so that it places minimal strain on the entire organism. That we also have a healthy cardiovascular system, a healthy lung, a healthy brain, healthy joints, and healthy hormone-producing organs. Have a completely healthy organism, healthy joints, and so on, healthy muscles, so that we can also maintain this hoped for and aimed for fit, vital, healthy life in the best mental health for a very, very, very long time. And it is by no means unrealistic to still have very, very healthy natural teeth well into your 80s. We see this ourselves in my practice that many people who have always followed everything well actually still have very, very good natural teeth in the 80 plus age group, and that would actually be the goal. And the book, Tooth Root Cause, is actually intended to contribute to this if younger people read it and take it to heart so that they can then successfully manage their dental health themselves as their own best health coach with the help of professional support from good dentists so that they can then still bite healthily and laugh with their own teeth, ideally even at 80, 90 plus. That would be the goal, yes.
Those are noble goals, of course.
Yes, they are noble goals, but not unrealistic.
Definitely not.
And nothing has to be perfect, of course, as I said before. Even if a lot has gone wrong, we already see in reality, empirically, it's just like that. It's a noble goal. I agree. It's not unrealistic. So honestly, the young people who have been following our prophylaxis concept sensibly since childhood, coming regularly and basically sticking to the essentials, they are now as young and middle-aged adults. We've been doing this for almost 30 years at the same location for about 27 years. They have nothing. They never need an implant, never need a crown, don't need root canal treatment, or almost none. At most, they need trauma follow-up, or if something went wrong in the past, minor follow-up restorations. But that is the goal, and it's not unrealistic, and it doesn't look like they'll need anything in the next 10 years, and that would be exactly the goal. But there are the other patient groups where it looks like, precisely because of this non-prophylaxis-oriented normality of the usual so-called repair dentistry, i.e. prevention neglected, then more or less inexpensive. Social measures, that's where the health consequential damage from omitted preventive measures and rather low quality restoration concepts then occurs, which are then silent inflammations, further consequential damage, periodontitis, insufficient prosthetic restorations, and that the consequential damage of treatment, consequential damage, because nothing is perfect, then ultimately increases the health or disease consequences and also the need for restoration immensely. And the goal would be a noble goal that this sequence of consequential damage is actually excluded in the future. And that we, if consequential damage is already present, then actually so efficiently rehabilitate it as finally as possible so that the consequential damage is minimized as much as possible. And both have to do with silent root cause. And the whole thing, of course, always considering the entire organism, the overall health. It is by no means just about beautiful white teeth, which you can also have made artificially, even in the rehabilitation of consequential damage. But it's actually about eliminating the further negative impacts on overall health. And empirically speaking, these consequential damages occur very, very frequently. Keyword silent inflammation, for example, periodontitis as a major widespread disease where you can do a lot, or also dead teeth with silent inflammation, ultimately burdens on the organism, which however have very, very large effects on cardiovascular health, for example, on the neuronal health of the brain, and many, many, many other things. On blood sugar regulation, on the entire metabolic system, on the microbiome, of course, then of course on endothelial health, so to speak, the vascular health in the terminal vessels, and so on and so forth, on the hormone balance, on healthy joints. So there are extremely many important overall systems in the entire organism that ultimately constitute quality of life and health. And dental health, dental jaw health, simply has an enormous amount to do with the entire organism due to this super close networking via everything possible: nervous system, blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, meridian references, and so on and so forth, naturally, also centrally. The oral cavity is, after all, at the beginning of the digestive system. And of course, it also influences gut health enormously, and then via other axes like the mouth-gut-brain axis, naturally also the neurotransmitter balance. And the immune system and also the metabolic state quite significantly. And that's why we come, when we consider overall health and also detoxification mechanisms, which I completely left out earlier, all these detox connections simply have an enormous amount to do with the oral cavity and also with nutrition. And that's why we are inevitably always at the center of the consideration of overall health. And that's why we can contribute an extreme amount if we do things right here. And we can also, of course, cause a lot of damage through neglect of appropriate preventive measures or incorrect rehabilitation concepts. And that's basically what it's about.
But the thing is, humans don't walk around as silos, right? So we've been talking this whole time about, let's say, the health pillar.
Yes, exactly.
That's why we developed our bio-longevity framework.
Exactly.
Where I say there's health, there's prosperity, whatever that means for each individual. And then there's the whole area of privacy, AI, so everything in this new world around artificial intelligence.
Absolutely.
That's ultimately unfolding with incredible momentum. And the big challenge for people is to bring all of that into harmony, which is where we want to offer support with our topics and products. Now I'm asking you, where would you start first? Now we have these 3 pillars. People are in the middle of life, so to speak. It's not like they're isolated and just pick one funnel and say, okay, now I'll only focus on this, now only on that. Where would you see the biggest levers, and perhaps in connection with the topic of silent root cause as mechanisms of action?
Yes, of course, everything is interconnected. So put simply, without health, everything is nothing. And without cash, you're stuck. So that's also clear. So prosperity is also an important topic. Why? Not at all in the sense that everyone should be swimming in money, although that wouldn't be a bad thing per se. It's about the fact that prosperity doesn't mean swimming in money, but prosperity means, as the name suggests, that you're doing well, that you're in a good position, and yes, in our materially organized world, you also need material means so that you can afford things like good nutrition, good healthcare, prevention, and ultimately good health measures, meaning being wealthy enough to afford them. And that's why both are important. Everyone can weigh them for themselves, but both are equally important because without one, nothing works. And without the other, nothing works either. And of course, it also has to do with freedom and self-determination. And for that, it's also about the topic of privacy. However, that's specifically defined in this longevity framework, of course. I think you can tell us more about that. It's also a very, very important topic. It's about freedom, independence, autonomy, self-reliance, a self-determined life.
Control over your own data.
Exactly, control over your own data, over your own destiny.
Actively shaping artificial intelligence to one's advantage, ultimately.
Of course. And of course, making use of all modern technologies yourself in a critical and responsible way without, or rather while being aware of the negative, unavoidable aspects of them, let's say. Technology in itself has never been good or bad. Neither the invention of the printing press was good or bad per se, although the system naturally saw it as a threat because it enabled a certain spread of knowledge. In the same way, neither the computer per se is bad or good, nor the internet per se good or bad, nor are any online messenger services per se good or bad, nor is any information in itself good or bad. And AI is certainly not good or bad. AI is a great way to make work easier. Of course, all technologies also have their downsides. It's always been that way and will always be that way in the future. It's about sharing knowledge here so that we can take these noble goals of autonomy, health into our own hands, take prosperity into our own hands and organize it. Organize freedom, independence, privacy ourselves, take it into our own hands. That's what it's ultimately about. Also to discuss things with an open mind, because it's rare that only one person is right. It's about exchanging ideas, exchanging them freely, free speech, free thinking, without political correctness, but always with respect. And it's about learning too. And everyone should be allowed to be the architect of their own fortune in their own way, if they want to.
I even believe that the complexity of what you're describing and also this new wave through artificial intelligence can even be broken down and simplified through the use of artificial intelligence if you do it cleverly. And people shouldn't really be put off by it, but should use it for themselves no matter what. It affects you as a biological dentist just as much, starting from diagnostics to all the great things you can actually use, just like the individual who suddenly uses some wearables to track whether they have their finances under control, whether they have their data under control, or. That's always the question. I think the most important thing, sorry if I jump in for a moment, is that people have a plan for themselves.
Yes.
And as soon as they have a plan, they can think about which of these silos, so to speak, health business or privacy AI, I want to use for myself, or where I set the priority now, so that I can bring everything into harmony over time.
Exactly. That's the most important keyword for me. Bringing everything into harmony over time according to your own premises and priorities, of course. But it's always just about time, health, and especially longevity. whether longevity itself or longevity in medicine, is always long-term, oriented around decades, and the same goes for the sustainable prosperity topic. Prosperity, you're doing well, that's prosperity. You can afford what you want. That's what I call prosperity, and that's what it's about. And the topic of privacy and lifestyle organization is also a long-term story. Everyone can set it up, should be able to set it up with the help of our tools, however he or she would like to. Especially in times of transformation, know-how and knowledge about connections and possibilities and the exchange of expertise is a real game changer. It simply takes various expertise in very different areas, not just in high-tech, AI, health, state-of-the-art medicine, state-of-the-art dentistry, state-of-the-art prevention, best nutrition, even the best biohack if you like, but ultimately it's also about, let's say, economic organizations, especially in times of the transformations already emerging, especially in the financial systems, and those simply affect us all internationally, globally. We don't even have a choice in that. There is a major transformation that has already taken place and that, in my opinion, will take extreme effect in the coming years. And for that, it's helpful if you have the appropriate knowledge so that you can also react accordingly, depending on your needs.
Exactly for that reason, we'll have many more deep dives in the next episodes where we can and will delve deeper into these topics. What I'd be interested in now, from your perspective, most people associate longevity with biohacking, so super optimizing every single detail. There are many pioneers who really want to super optimize everything in their lives. Is that your understanding of bio-longevity, or how would you define it for yourself? Or what would you perhaps give the listener as a guide on how it should be viewed?
Well, it's not my understanding. It's still important to also look at individual aspects from the biohacker scene or from the latest science quite analytically. So it takes both. So personally, the question was, is that my thing? No, it's not my approach. I'm also not the super bio tracker with all the wearables that exist. Personally, I'm more of a feeler, and I also think for myself quite consciously in long periods, decades. And I always look at the big picture I'm a big fan of the big picture. I'm analytically a big picture analyst, so to speak, for myself. But I'm also interested in super specific scientific details, but I always try to place it in an overall context. Because one thing is also clear, back to the roots, as they say, meaning old knowledge and the old basic things are simply perennials for me. And that's why before I get interested in the latest bio-wearable tracker for some specific blood value, I personally would rather go into the forest for an hour and really run in nature, breathe deeply, breathe nature in the truest sense of the word. That personally brings me much more. And I believe that it has a much deeper, also spiritual, mental meaning. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't monitor and track your blood sugar, for example, and take appropriate lifestyle measures to avoid blood sugar spikes. So in a way, it takes both, but getting totally obsessed with some super details, in a sense, is something I personally consider to be unfocused. That doesn't mean it's bad, but I think you always have to keep your focus on the big picture. And the details and the science and the current gadgets are also very helpful, especially if you already know about specific detailed problems that you might have yourself. But you must never lose sight of the overall picture.
I would perhaps also look at it from another perspective, because for many people it's about not just saying, don't tell me, show me, but also somehow getting something to hold on to that they can use as a guide, let's say. Especially if I'm in a bit of a slump now, right, and I can't really pinpoint it, it might be helpful to see or to know, okay, that's where the cause is, so to speak, which is why we have the silent root cause, right? That's hopefully where the origin is, and that's what I can specifically do, and then I can check and see, and I think that just helps many people.
Exactly.
That doesn't mean that one is wrong or right or different. I also think, and that's exactly the big challenge, to break down the complexity here again and say, what is your goal? What is your plan? And then to say which instruments or approaches help you individually
the most. Sure. It's certainly very helpful if you know the most important longevity parameters for yourself, let's say, and also measure them occasionally to get them into the green zone. So that's perfectly clear, yes. So what would be the typical things here? let's say nutritionally. We can't go into that now because we don't have the time in this episode.
We'll get to that in another episode.
But of course, it makes sense to know roughly where my blood sugar is, where the peaks are, and what the problem is. Blood pressure can also be discussed controversially, things like that too. Of course, it's good to know where my vitamin D level is, where my omega-3 index is. Those are already very, very, very important parameters. But you shouldn't now focus solely on one thing, only to then think that this is now the single healthiest or most longevity promoting detail. Because in this whole measurable thing, there are completely different aspects. I'm talking about social contacts, for example, social, mental, emotional, spiritual, humor. Let's call them mental, metaphysical aspects, such as the appreciation and enjoyment of music, pure joy, things like that, which play at least as big a role in the overall context of longevity and joy of life as, say, a healthy tooth might. On the other hand, if someone has an acute tooth infection, suppuration, or even just ordinary pain, then of course the joy of life, at least in that episode, is maximally compromised or destroyed. So it depends.
Well, personally, I'm of the opinion that every extreme is just extreme, right? That means if I try to maintain a good balance, to establish a kind of sustainability, balance is always the goal. That doesn't mean I can't swing back and forth between extremes, but I eventually settle somewhere, yeah.
Exactly. Although personally, I do think being extremely healthy is worth striving for. Being extremely fit is not a bad thing, yeah.
Definitely.
Extremely good, or as the Bavarians say, saugut, I think is worth aiming for. That doesn't mean you have to have it, but personally I'm more of a fan of an A+. But it's also not bad if you have a B- somewhere.
Everyone can decide that for themselves. I think it's also dependent on the phase of life.
Absolutely. It really depends on what.
With our podcasts, we've also committed ourselves to a hands-on mentality. What does that mean specifically? It means that besides all the knowledge, science contributions, and so on that we'll bring, it's very important to us to give people very specific actionable tools or measures, habits, routines, whatever you want to call them. If you were to think about it, what would be that one super tip when it comes to longevity that you'd like to share with people today?
Take care of your social contacts.
How do I do that specifically?
Make sure you have inspiring people in your network with whom you regularly exchange ideas on inspiring topics. And the second tip, make sure you go out into real nature every day for at least half an hour or at least 20 minutes and move around there, whether it's running, cycling, or just walking or brisk walking. It's really very important for that connection to nature.
We know from behavioral research that people need an average of 120 days before they can integrate something new into their daily lives. If you take our biolongevity framework with health, wealth, and privacy AI, what would be the routine you'd like to give people today? One that gives you a lot of energy, that's perhaps an even more important addition.
Well, actually, it's best to go out into nature in the morning at dawn or ideally in the morning sun. That also has enormously positive effects in terms of measurement and biohacking, certain infrared rays from sunlight. So looking into the morning sun for 3 minutes in the morning, even with your eyes, has via the retina, via the mitochondria in the retina, really great systemic effects. It also activates the overall mitochondria and many other tools. So things like that are actually incredibly helpful, but it also helps to perhaps trudge through the snow on a snowy morning and breathe in the cold air outside for a bit. So in any case, activating in the morning, activating nature is absolutely essential.
Ideally, even barefoot in the sense of grounding to sort of absorb the energy as well, right?
Yes, that would certainly be good, although I have to admit, when I go jogging, I do wear sneakers. Good running shoes, but I'm just too much of a wimp for that.
Thank you so much for taking the time today. We'll be diving into many, many other exciting topics around longevity, health worths, and privacy AI. Especially from your great book, Silent Root Cause, which is about the undetected silent inflammations at the core, which I think are particularly important for everyone to understand the concepts behind them and the mechanisms of action they can have, meaning
brain fog.
ranging from fatigue, lack of energy, or other limitations. Brain fog is a huge topic, sleep problems, there are so many exciting topics, or breathing technique possibilities. We'll be bringing in a lot more on these topics as well. I'm very happy that you listened today to our episode Longevity to Go, our launch episode on the topic of silent root cause featuring Dr. Robert Bauder. And anyone who wants to continue today is also cordially invited to join our membership. We'll provide the link below. Robert, would you like to add anything important?
Exactly. Well, personally, I'm a big fan of the German language because it's very clear and distinct and honest. Nonetheless, here in the podcast and also in our, let's say, publishing activities, we've opted for the internationally common, more English language version with many expressions and subject areas. And we've also recorded our contributions, partly live in English, partly with AI support to make it faster.
In Spanish too.
In Spanish and Japanese too, very important. But what I actually wanted to say is, personally, I'm a big fan of the honest German language. Nonetheless, the fact is that in this age of transformation, we naturally operate internationally because knowledge and know-how are simply international. And especially in these, let's call them more transformative fields, like in modern terms, longevity. It used to be called anti-aging. Better aging, I just say staying healthy for a long time, or longevity. It's just that these terms move us internationally, cross-border, and that's why we've decided, with a certain drop of bitterness, to consciously move away from the good, clear, honest German language here. We chose this because it simply allows us to serve the larger market in an easily understandable way, and of course to operate within this market environment. And not just on an island. I just wanted to say that because it's really important to me.
Since I'm being
criticized for it, with good reason, but because it was important to me to mention it once more.
Great, a really great point. May I add something as well? I have two very important points to add to that. Namely, the first point is that anyone who looks into aging healthily will inevitably discover that it's scientifically proven that when we humans play musical instruments or learn other new languages, it helps us to stay, so to speak, mentally sharper. That means you could also view it from this perspective when you engage with other languages. And what I also find very exciting is the topic of artificial intelligence. If someone thinks, for example, they can use ChatGPT in German by entering a German prompt, they should take a look at the results they get, because naturally all these systems are set up differently. This means that if the prompt is entered in English, a different level of quality will come out. Everyone can test that out for themselves and see. I can only recommend to everyone, if you're working with AI and creating any prompts, always do it in English. On that note, I'll bring today's episode to a close. We were very happy that you stopped by and listened in. We're always happy to receive any suggestions you have. If you have ideas, requests, or perhaps exciting topics or interview partners that you think would be great to explore within the Biolongevity framework, send them our way. We'd love to hear them. All the best until then. Have a wonderful free life. Longevity to go.
Exactly. See you soon. We're looking forward to it.